Let's see. There's that. All right. I noticed that Josh, the college group is using some kind of Bible study on Proclaim, it looks like. Yeah, that's interesting. That's the first time I've noticed it. They may have been doing it for a while, but I noticed on Proclaim that was one of the options. I almost opened it just to mess with them, change slides a lot while they're like, what's going on? That wouldn't be very nice, though. And I said this morning we should be kind to each other. So I'm going to try to be kind. Yeah, it's hard on me, but I'm going to try it. Yeah, just this once. But yeah, it's good to see you guys today. We'll start here in just a couple of minutes. Yeah. Miles on it. And so from Geico's perspective, I should be paying them to be driving it around. I mean, like, that car is so old and ugly. They're like, you should be paying some kind of premium for driving that nasty vehicle around. So a friend of mine is going to replace the bumper. I'm going to pay him to replace just the bumper. The door is really expensive. It's $2,000 to replace the lift door. And I think because it's got a lot of electronics to it and stuff. It's got an automatic. You can use so because of that, there's a lot of electronics to it and stuff, and the lights and everything. So I'm just going to leave it bent. But the bumper's the really eyesore. I don't think you'd really notice much about the bent door if it weren't for the bumper. So I'm going to pay this friend of mine $600. He's replacing the bumper. He's supposed to do it on Wednesday. And I'm just going to leave the bent door. But I didn't know this. If your car gets totaled out, I've done a little research on this. What happens is the state is supposed to issue you a new totaled out title. Then you have to go prove that it's street worthy. So after I get the new bumper on there, I don't know where I'm supposed to take it, but you're supposed to go somewhere and show there's nothing wrong with the car. I mean, it's a little ding or it's a little dented on the back door. That has nothing to do with the function. All the lights work. The door opens and closes. I can't open and close it now because the bumper's bent up into it. But if the bumper won't bend into it, even the back hatch would work. So I got to take it there. And then when you do that, the state issues you a new title on your vehicle from the previously totaled out title. So I got to get that, and then when I get that, I'll call the insurance company. But I wasn't carrying collision on it anyway. Not that it mattered in this case, someone hit me, but I wasn't carrying collision anyway. So I guess I'll go back to the insurance company and say, there's a new VIN number, here's the new title. I don't want you to cover it, I just want you to cover me driving it. And so which I think they'll do. So from what I can tell, that's my plan. Now, so far, no one at the insurance company nor the state has said anything about it. So I don't know if maybe because I didn't have collision on it, my insurance company may not care. I just don't know. But I've got to figure that out. Yeah, I'm only carrying liability. But I think if they determined that it was totaled out, it's not street worthy, that you could get in trouble if I ran into someone. They'd be like, oh, you're driving a car that got totaled out. You can't do that. That's what I'm concerned about. So I want to make sure the car is still covered. But I think what they'll do is issue a new title. They'll keep the VIN, but they'll issue a new title. No, apparently this is, yeah. So I got hit like 4 weeks ago. Geico cut me a check for $3,000, which was great. I mean, I didn't like the fact that they thought so little of my car, but yeah, they issued me a check. And so I told Geico, I'm not fixing this, probably. And they're like, we don't care what you do with the money. You suffered this loss, but I want to get it retitled, because what if someone hits me again? If they hit me again right now, the insurance company of the person who hit me wouldn't pay anything, because they'd be like, it was totaled out. You already got your money. So I need to get it retitled. That way if someone hits me on the side or something, then the car has been retitled. Plus, if I want to sell it to like CarMax or someone like that, I have to have that new title. So my goal here is in a bit to replace the vehicle, and I may sell it to CarMax or someone like that, but I need that new title. So I didn't know all this. I'm learning these things. It's a bit of a hassle. Yeah, I mean, at first I was like, oh, this is fine. Someone gave me $3,000. I'm going to spend $500-600, fix the bumper. But now I'm going, okay, this seems like there's some headache here. Now, obviously, I would have been preferred they just not hit me. That would have actually, if I were picking preferences, that would have been it. I'm up a couple of grand at this point, even after paying for the bumper. But I feel like the hassle factor here, I may go later and go, I wished I just hadn't gotten hit, because I think I'm going to have to do a lot of administrative stuff to be able to drive it and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I think I'm going to get Kim a car, and I'm going to take her old car. But I think I'm going to keep my SUV just because if I need to haul something, I'll just have it back up. And I think insurance-wise, since I'm only carrying liability on it, I don't think insurance-wise probably they wouldn't charge me too much for it. And so I'll just leave it parked at the apartment, and I'll drive Kim's car. But for a baseball guy, sometimes it's helpful to have more cargo space, so I can like carry buckets of baseballs and baseball bats and stuff like that. Or in this case, mulch. I can carry mulch to someone's house. So I need to get my bumper fixed this week so I can take mulch to some people. Because some people are like, hey, yeah, can you bring it? I'm like, I think so, but I need to get the bumper fixed because I can't lift the back of it. So yeah. Okay, all right, fair enough. Last year, I hauled, I could put as many as 30 bags of mulch in that SUV, no problem. And so if someone ordered, hey, I want 30 bags or 25 bags of mulch, I would just take it to them. I had one kid who wanted 60 bags, and so I took them 30 and then 30 again. And they were putting it in 2 neighbors' houses, which was great. They made a ton of money. And I just charged them $3 a bag. I paid for the gasoline and everything because I was just happy they were going to make so much money for camp. I was like, hey, I'll drive it over there. But now I'm like, I don't know if I can get it in. I don't know how to get it in there. So I'm struggling a little bit with the logistics of that. My son's got a truck too. I may harass him a little bit and go, I gotta have the red truck, kid. But yeah, I'll let you know. Yeah, because it is helpful to be able to throw. It's not heavy. Those bags aren't heavy. You can just throw them in there. But my plan of moving it has changed a little. And so anyway, if you need mulch, $5 a bag. Grab whatever you need. Just tell me what you got. You can give it to me in cash or Zelle or whatever you got to do. It's not tax deductible, obviously, just if you do it, because it's for a product. And then what I do is $2 a bag goes to the student scholarship fund. And so all I'm trying to do is cover my basic costs. I got to pay them $3,000 for all of that mulch and dirt out there. It's we recommend $9 a bag installed, delivered and installed. And so we did an install this week, 25 bags. I think the person gave us like $200, a little more than $200, and which is great because I got $75 to cover my cost, and that student got like $150 to go toward camp, which is not nothing. And it didn't take them long. It took them a couple hours. I mean, counting the drive time and loading it up and driving it down there and install, and the gas they spent doing it. But in terms of scholarship, I love this fundraiser. I don't like it because I feel a bit on the hook. Like if it doesn't go well, I'm out $3,000, and what am I going to do with 20 pallets of mulch? My yard's not that big, and now I live in an apartment, so that would be weird to mulch my back patio. I don't know, but I like it because if you go to Home Depot, price-wise, $5 a bag is pretty similar to there, and the quality of this product is really, really good. We've compared it, and Jamisco, they have the best mulch and the best topsoil and the best compost stuff on the market. And so if you compared it with Home Depot, it would be almost identical pricing. And you can just grab it while you're here, too. You don't have to go by Home Depot. So if you're like, we're going to put 10 bags in, you just grab 10 bags. And then just hand me a 50 or whatever. And then I'll put 20 into the youth scholarship fund, and the rest I'll put in my account to cover, because tomorrow I'm going to call them and pay. Jamisco also doesn't ask for the money. I have to call them. I've had the stuff out here since mid-January. They haven't called and said, hey, you owe us $3,000. They haven't said anything. Same thing the last 2 years. I'll call them about mid-March and go, hey, I think I owe y'all some money. They go, oh, yeah, you do. I'm shocked that they don't call and harass you and go, hey, we need the money. But they do it for fundraisers. And so they just wait till the group's sold a lot of it, and then you call them and pay. They're super chill about it. So, yeah, it's amazing. We have cedar, we have pine, we have hardwood. No, this is traditional mulch. Yeah, the cedar in particular is people love the cedar because bugs don't like it. And so people like putting that cedar mulch in there. I don't like the cedar mulch because my son's allergic to cedar. And so it's like we get rid of bugs, but he's sneezing all the time. So we use the pine mulch is what we've been using at the house. And I did not buy the red or the black mulch this year. They dye those, and they're fine, and they look really good. Like, they look sharp in the yard. My only issue is they will stain whatever you're wearing to deliver it. That red comes, whatever they dip it in. And so I had clothes last year that still now have, and I'm a baseball coach, so I have white baseball pants, and one pair I think I just threw away because it got red and black mulch dye on them, and I just went, throw them away. So anyway, it turns out you're not supposed to do the colored mulch when you're wearing white baseball pants. Turned out, who knew? Probably I should have known, but Yeah, and I got red and black dye in the back of my SUV, and I just told you, it has 300,000 miles on it, so I don't know that you can even tell that that's what's happened. All right. Well, enough of that, but if you need some mulch, let me know. And again, you can just grab it and text me. And you just some people handed me cash this morning, some people have Zelled, some people, I don't care. I'm not even keeping that close tabs on it. Whatever I get, I'm going to keep $3 a bag, give $2 to the scholarship fund. In the end, I won't know I don't think I'll break even, but if I get close to it and kids raise a couple of grand for camp, I'll sleep fine at night. Yeah, you go, well, you lost $500 on that. I go, yeah, the kids they'll make more than that because the installs are more. So I'll be like, yeah, but I lost $500, but the kids raised $4,000 for camp. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that. That's a loss I'm willing to take. So I don't know how much I lost on it last year. I figure a few $100s. Like I said, I'm not tracking it, but ultimately I don't really care. I just want the kids to raise some funds. And I like it because as a fundraiser, they actually do something, especially on the installs. Like they're actually working with their hands to raise funds for their own camp. To me, that's meaningful. So anyway, enough of that, but just that's going on. All right, so hey, it's good to see you guys this morning. We're a week after daylight savings time. Have you recovered yet? No? Starting to feel a little bit. This morning when I got up and the alarm went off, unlike last Sunday when it went off, and I was like really, really unhappy with life. This morning I was like, okay, I'm a little more adjusted. So hopefully you're adjusted to this daylight savings time and don't still have jet lag. 1 hour jet lag from your time change. So.
1 hour, Bob, don't ever travel.
Yeah, don't ever travel, right? Yeah. So I fly to Thailand and India a lot, and it really is.
How many hours difference is that?
Yeah, well, India is 11 and a half. Thailand's 11 or 12, depending. And then Burma is 11 and a half also, or 12 and a half different ahead of us. So, yeah.
Plus the time it takes to actually fly.
Right, sure. Yeah. The worst flight I ever took was Chicago to Delhi. That was the worst flight ever. 16 hours, and I had a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old with me. That was no fun. Yeah, there's only so much Benadryl will do for you. I'm just telling you. Yeah. Oh, we didn't give it to the boys. We gave it to all the people sitting around us. So they would all be unconscious while our kids went crazy, Yeah. I just sprinkled it into their drinks, The whole group's all knocked out and our kids are just climbing everywhere. It was great. Yeah.
I went from Kansas to California to Okinawa with 2 little kids.
Oh,
Thank God it was back in the day before, everything blew up.
yeah.
The stewardess, one of them, took my son, who was fussy as all get out, up to the cabin to see the pilot.
Oh, yeah. Nowadays you do that. I think they'll get tased. Yeah. 5-year-old tased for trying to break into the cockpit. Yeah. That's probably what would happen now. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Well, and so one time I did that, and the place where I was had daylight savings time, and then I switched countries, and they had daylight savings time the next weekend. So I was really, really messed up. I was in another country. They went through daylight savings time, went to another country, who then did daylight savings time the following weekend. I was really messed up for a while, and then flew on to India from there. And by the time it was all said and done, I had no idea. I was totally confused then, but all right, well, it's good to see you guys this morning. We've been working through the book of Isaiah, and this is a historical challenge. There's a lot of history here and knowing our context. And so I want to take a minute just to read. This is chapter 2, so we got a new chapter. It says, the word of Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It's very similar to the opening of chapter 1, but the opening of chapter 1 includes the names of the kings, Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. But this one just, again, that's why some people assume that the first 5 chapters of Isaiah are more summary chapters, because Isaiah 6 is the formal calling of Isaiah. But here you have, again, kind of this introductory statement, the word which Isaiah saw. That's an interesting, by the way, that's an interesting way of saying that, isn't it? The word which Isaiah saw. I don't know. I found that interesting. He saw it. It's a word, but he saw it. So you would have thought it's something he heard. I don't know how he saw it. We're not told. Written on the wall, is this like Daniel in Babylon? The words written on the wall, he saw it? I don't know. It says, now it will come about that in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of mountains, and it will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between the nations, and will render decisions for many peoples. And they will hammer their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. Come, house of Jacob, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. For you have abandoned your people, the house of Jacob, because you are filled with influences from the east, and they are soothsayers like the Philistines, and they strike bargains with the children of foreigners. Their land has also been filled with silver and gold, and there is no end to their treasures. Their land has been filled with horses, and there is no end to their chariots. Their land has also been filled with idols. They worship the work of their hands, that which their fingers have made. So the common man has been humbled, and the man of importance has been abased. But do not forgive them. Enter the rock and hide in the dust from the terror of the Lord, from the splendor of his majesty. The proud look of man will be abased, and the loftiness of man will be humbled, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. For the Lord of hosts will have a day of reckoning against everyone who is proud and lofty, and against everyone who is lifted up, that he may be abased. And it will be against all the cedars of Lebanon that are lofty and lifted up, against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the lofty mountains, against all the hills that are lifted up, against every high tower, against every fortified wall, against all the ships of Tarshish, and against all the beautiful craft. The pride of men will be humbled, and the loftiness of men will be abased. And the Lord alone will be exalted in that day, but the idols will be completely vanished. Men will go into caves of the rocks and the holes of the ground before the terror of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty when he arises to make the earth tremble. In that day, men will cast away to the moles and the bats their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, in order to go into the caverns of the rocks and the clefts of the cliffs before the terror of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty when he arises to make the earth tremble. Stop regarding man, whose breath of life is in his nostrils, for why should he be esteemed? All right, so that's our text before us today. Let's pray. God, thank you for your word, and use now this time as we study the scripture to give us clarity. We pray all these things in the name of Christ. Amen. All right, well, we have before us a text here that talks about the day of the Lord. This is a phrase that's not uncommon to us in the scripture, the last days, the day of the Lord. And so we have here, I'm going to go ahead and move to verse 2. Okay, so it says here, it says, now it will come about in the last days. So this phrase, the last days, the day of the Lord, and throughout both Old Testament and New Testament, in the New Testament, the last days is used a few times. On that day, or the day of the Lord is used a few times, but that phrase actually originates in Old Testament theology and Old Testament scripture. And the last days tends to, from my perspective, I'm reading this, tends to focus on a couple things. First, the history of the Jewish people, and secondly, the history of the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem becomes a very significant part of the study of Old Testament prophecy. You find this in the book of Daniel. You find this in Jeremiah, where Jeremiah is 70 years until the return of Israel to the city of Jerusalem, to the holy city. You have in Daniel, where he prays in Daniel chapter 9. It's near the 70 years. Daniel is at this point an older guy. It's hard to imagine this, because if you've ever seen pictures of Daniel in the lion's den, they always show him as a younger guy, but he probably would have been in his 80s. And so portraits of Daniel in the lion's den, I've seen some that are amazing. The one by Rembrandt School that's at the National Museum of in the National Gallery of Art in D.C. It's massive. It's probably 15 feet wide and 7 or 8 feet tall. It's just massive. It fills a whole wall in the National Gallery, and it's Daniel in the lion's den. It's spectacular. It's an unbelievable painting, but Daniel's a younger guy, and I always chuckle when I see it. It's like, I think Daniel would have been an older guy, because we're through all of the Babylonian rule and into the Persian rule by the time that occurs. Remember, this is under the Persian king, the Medo-Persian rule, not under Babylonian rule. So you have all of Nebuchadnezzar's reign and his successors, Belshazzar and his fall, and it would have taken some time before Daniel winds up in this predicament. So I'm expecting Daniel has probably been in Babylon for 50 to 60 years by the time this happens, and he's been marking on the wall, right? I think doing the tally marks, and he's gotten up into the 60s, and he starts praying, Lord, what about the city of Jerusalem? Remember that? Daniel chapter 9, and he's told prophecy about the city. 70 years was the prophecy for the city of Jerusalem to be abandoned. Why was it 70 years? What's that? Yeah, that's okay. So that's how long they're going to be in captivity. And the 70 years represented the 70 Sabbath years that Israel didn't let the land rest. So that those feasts, that Sabbath feast years, they didn't. So Daniel gets a message based on that, though, that it will be 7 70s or 490 years predicted for the city of Jerusalem after the city wall and moat has been, after the rebuilding of the city. And in there, Messiah will come and be cut off at year 483. Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And then we have silence. Daniel doesn't tell us. And then we come to the last 7, the final 7. And Daniel gives us in Daniel chapter 12, that last 7 is divided into a set of days, much like we see in the book of Revelation, very similar type parallel. But all of that is focused on the city of Jerusalem. We don't have a lot about church age. We don't have a lot about the gospel. Daniel knows Messiah has come and is cut off and has nothing with the city of Jerusalem, that the city is ultimately not part of the storyline of the church age as much. But then the city comes back into play. And so, yeah, and I think here we have a future prediction. Now, we've talked about this before when we were in the book of Revelation and in other prophetic material. There is groups of individuals that have asserted that the church, a replacement theology, that the church has replaced Israel, and all these promises have to do with the church. But notice that the mountain itself is where the nations are going to stream, the holy mountain. There's a reference here, I think, to Zion, to the city of Jerusalem. It will come about in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established. The mountain of the house of the Lord. That seems to me the house of the Lord is a regular reference to the temple, the mountain that it was built upon, the city of Jerusalem, the mountain there. And it will be the chief of all mountains and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. The it being the mount of the Lord, the house of the Lord, that there will be the world itself will all stream to the city of Jerusalem. Now, this is in the midst of Isaiah getting prophecy about the coming fall of the city. I mean, he's going to wind up with some lengthy prophecies here about the impending doom of the city, the fall of the city, the Babylonian captivity. He gets these kinds of prophecies throughout the book of Isaiah, but with those we have it balanced with this future promise for the city. Now, in replacement theology, what happens is people say the church is the new Israel, and this mountain is more theoretical, more symbolic, not literal. It's not a literal mountain. It's not literally the house of the Lord. The house of the Lord, we're the temple of the Lord because the Spirit of God lives in us. We take our temple with us now. This is all symbolic. But it does seem that this prophecy is about the Jewish people and the city of Jerusalem itself. And so it's very hopeful in that for Isaiah in his day, the city of Jerusalem is in repair. I mean, it's been surrounded. There's lots of Assyrian encroachment. And within a generation or two, the city will be destroyed completely. And I'd say within a few generations. And so for this kind of hopeful promise and the prophecy is very important. And I don't buy the replacement theology. I do think there are promises that the church has today that are similar to what God gave Israel. I think there's some of that is true, because God is a God of promise and God is a God of faithfulness. And so some of that type of language, it's not a surprise that the church would bear some of that same type of hopeful promise and language in terms of inheritance, in terms of future, in terms of Jesus as Messianic King, all of that kind of language. Of course, there would be some parallel there, but I don't think it's a complete replacement. And I don't think that the nation of Israel and the city of Jerusalem is irrelevant or unimportant in terms of future events. Now, I'm not telling you it's going to happen next week. We've talked about this already. I don't know. I'm not a predictor of things like that. Those who have been have failed miserably. So I just be careful with that. Yeah, I mean, there's a long history of people making terrible predictions that didn't come out to be true. So I'm just going to say, in the future, I think Israel and the city of Jerusalem will play a role in some aspect of the future. Yeah.
Whether it's replacement theology or any other theology, I find that a lot of teachers, if the theology, if their theology disagrees with the literal interpretation of whatever the passage says, the answer is symbolic.
Right. Sure.
Whenever it disagrees with your own personal theology,
Sure.
it can't be literal. It must be symbolic.
Sure. And we get that with real basic theology, like the virgin birth, for instance, where I'll hear even individuals who I put in the category of evangelical will say, well, this is really more symbolic. Matthew doesn't really mean that literally, or Luke doesn't really mean that literally. So I agree that symbolism, there is symbolism in the Bible, and so where it is explicitly symbolic, we should acknowledge it's symbolic. But where there's language like this doesn't appear to be symbolic at all. And Isaiah, the other thing is, how would the original writer have understood it? I can't imagine Isaiah viewed this as symbolic and being fulfilled in the church age. This would have meant to him something pretty concrete. The mountain of the house of the Lord would have been a very concrete thing. He could look and see it. So it's not like he would have said, well, this must be symbolic. He wouldn't have said that at all. He would have looked up and said, okay, the house of the Lord, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief mountain, and the nations will stream to it. he says this, and many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and that he may teach us concerning his ways. Boy, that thing keeps doing that. Concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word from the Lord from Jerusalem. And so we have this statement that all the peoples will come, and they will come actually with a very humble attitude. They will come and say to one another, let's go up to the house of the Lord. This is very positive. Let him teach us his ways. So the nations will stream to the city of Jerusalem, and they're streaming there not with the desire for war, but for knowledge, out of humility, out of an act of humility. Let us come to the mountain of the Lord and be taught, right? There's an aspect of humility here. And this is very much in contrast to what Isaiah is going to give us in prophecy later about the immediate future of Jerusalem, where Babylon and Assyria, when they come to Jerusalem, will not come to Jerusalem to learn something from the Lord. They're going to come to destroy. And ultimately, the Babylonians will completely destroy the city. But so this seems something different. And this is something far future. In fact, he goes on to say, he will judge between the nations, render decisions. And we find here the end of war, right? We find the end of warfare, that they will take implements of war and will turn them into implements for farming, right? So military is going to take their Humvees and turn them into farm equipment. The military is going to take, that kind of technology is going to be used for farming instead of for warfare. So this is a picture here that the energy and effort, the money that's used for warfare will all go away and be used instead just for the production of crops and good things. So that's the imagery here. And you think about how much money the U.S. alone spends on this idea of warfare. And I think the annual budget is $800 billion on the military per year. So over the last, 2 decades, you're talking about $15-20 trillion. And this verse says when Christ comes back, all of that kind of budgetary focus on military won't be needed anymore. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? That sounds terrific. That we don't have to have young men and women worried about war breaking out and having to send them to a battlefield. We don't have to worry about someone attacking another nation unjustly or invading or bombing or things like that. That all that will go away. And we're watching this all over the world right now. There's tensions all over the world. I'm seeing it in one of my favorite places in the world, in Myanmar. There's a lot of tension there right now. And there's there's kind of a civil war conflict going on there. And there's a lot of death and destruction. We see it in Ukraine. We see it in Gaza. We've seen it around the world. It's going on right now. And this is not new. This has been going on all over the world now for hundreds and hundreds of years and more of warfare. And even during the time of Isaiah, you have the emergence of Assyria and then the fall of Assyria at the hands of the Babylonians, where the Babylonians literally wipe out the entire nation. So, and then we see this later. The Babylonians get beaten by the Medo-Persians. And then the Medo-Persians get beaten by the Greeks. And then the Greeks get beaten by the Seleucians and Ptolemies get beaten by the Romans. I mean, there's just this nonstop drumbeat of war. And so Isaiah, in the midst of that, discovers that in the last days, that all the nations, no warfare, no weapons of war, will stream to Jerusalem. And when they get there, they will be humble and want to be instructed by the Lord. Yeah. I think that is very possible. In fact, that text has been used to suggest Jesus' second coming would occur during the Feast of Tabernacles. Yeah, that text from Zechariah. I don't know if you know this. There's an obsession among the people who are quite tuned into end-time prophecy. That text in particular has tried to peg the return of Jesus during the calendaring of the Feast of Tabernacles because of that. But yes, I think so. I do think so, is that it does have that feel to it. And by the way, in Micah, when we studied Micah, I know that was Micah 4 was months ago, but it says this. It will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of mountains. Sound familiar? Many will come, say, let us, and then he will judge between the peoples. That sound familiar? It's a direct quotation. All right, so here's the question. Which one came first? I don't know. I think Isaiah is probably primary, Micah secondary. Probably. That Micah got a hold of this prophecy from Isaiah and wrote it into his prophecy as well. That being said, it's identical. Like it's almost verbatim. And because of that, their source material is the same. So either Isaiah got it from Micah, or Micah got it from Isaiah, or the two of them got it from some extra source, some other source. My suspicion is that Isaiah and Micah are contemporaries. Isaiah and Micah knew of each other's ministries, and Micah and Isaiah, maybe Micah got a hold of this particular prophecy, and he included it in his material as from the Lord, which is right, because Isaiah was a prophet of the Lord. That's probably what happened. So just like in the New Testament, where Paul might quote from the Old Testament, or Jesus might quote from the Old Testament, thus the word of the Lord is this, or the word of the Lord says this. Micah is quoting from a true source here. Isaiah is a prophet, and he puts it into his text. So we've seen this text before and talked about this. Now, this use of the last days, this is the only occurrence in Isaiah of this phrase. I found that interesting. Now, it obviously occurs in Micah, because we just put it in Micah. It occurs that one time in Micah. The only other occurrences there's a few times in Jeremiah, a few times in Ezekiel, once or twice in Ezekiel, and then Hosea has it as well. I find that interesting. Hosea refers to the last days, this word last days. Now, in the New Testament, it does show up a few times in the New Testament. The book of Hebrews, remember, it opens up with this phrase, God who spoke long ago through the fathers and the prophets in many portions, in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son. And he is the exact representation of his nature, right? That whole text, beautiful text, right? So Hebrews 1, we also see it in the book of 2 Peter 3, where he warns about in the last days, both judgment and good. And we also see it in the book of James. James 5 refers to last days. The idea, though, of the last days, I think, is in the New Testament, though. It's there quite a bit. So one thing we see about last days, though, I did want to mention this to you. There's always, if you study the text around it, it's almost always has both positive and negative implications. So in the last days, for the faithful, this is glorious. And for those who are on the outside of that, this is terrifying. So in Isaiah 2, you get both. He's going to lay out this very hopeful message here at the beginning, and it's everyone's going to stream. They're going to go, we want to go to Jerusalem so the Lord may teach us his ways. They're going to stop warfare. It's going to stop. It will go away forever. Never, ever again will they learn about war. In heaven, no one's going to have to learn how to handle a sword or handle a gun or handle a weapon of mass destruction or a nuclear war. No one's going to have to learn any of this stuff. War will go away. There will be no reason for it. And you think about the amount of money, time, energy, fear, news reporting that is built around the fact that we make stuff in order to kill each other with. There's a lot of emphasis on that, right? And look, by the way, I'm not knocking America defending itself or having a military. I'm not knocking. I'm just saying in heaven, all of that kind of energy that is built around, a huge amount of our lives is built around that, will go away. And so, and this is a celebratory thing. In heaven, we won't have to teach our kids. You won't have to teach anyone. You won't have to teach our children. I don't know what that means actually in heaven. But anyway, we won't have to teach anyone. Here's how you handle a sword. Here's how you handle a gun. We don't have to do that. They'll never again will they learn about war. But there is a warning here, come, house of Jacob, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. For you have abandoned your people, the house of Jacob, because they are filled with influences from the east. They are soothsayers like the Philistines, and they strike bargains with the children of foreigners. Their land is filled with silver and gold. So they're rich, they're really rich, but their land is also filled with idols. They worship the works of their hands. So the desire for silver and gold has led to a sense of idolatry. They've taken the silver and gold. They've gotten rich. They're wealthy. They're powerful. They're influential. They have horses. They have chariots. There's no end to these things. But their land is also filled with idols. And this seems to be associating the two together. They're like, wow, this idol worship stuff's working. Look how many horses we have. Look how much silver and gold we have. They worship the work of their hands, which their fingers have made. And we get then this statement, so the common man has been humbled and the man of importance has been abased. But do not forgive them. Enter the rock and hide in the dust from the terror of the Lord and from the splendor of his majesty. The proud look of man will be abased, and the loftiness of man will be humbled, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. See, that's the key phrase for all this. So what's going on is at the very end, you're going to have people who go, let's stream to the house of the Lord to be taught by him. But when that day comes, there's also going to be wealthy nations and wealthy people who are engaged in idolatry, who are not humble, who are destined to reject the Lord, and they will face judgment. So this is a basic contrast of the last days or the coming day or that day is this contrast. It's a joyful, celebratory thing for those who are following after the Lord and long to be in his presence and long to learn from him. They'll celebrate that day. For those who don't want that and have made themselves wealthy and have worshiped through idolatry, who are proud, those individuals, that day of celebration in the city of Jerusalem will be a day of tremendous judgment. They will be abased. They will be humbled. They will hide from the terror of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty. And so this is very common language when it comes to the last days or the final days or that day is the contrast of two extreme reactions to it. One is one of tremendous joy of let's go up to the house of the Lord. Let's go be learners. Let's go learn from him. We want to learn his ways and walk according to his ways. We don't want this warfare anymore. We want all that stuff put away. We want an eternal, everlasting peace. But there's another group when this day unfolds. These will be individuals who've been warring against the Lord and have been involved in idolatry and have been involved in wealth. And because of the wealth, idolatry has flown as an extension of the wealth. I think you see this here, that the more the wealth has flown, the more the idolatry has come. So I'm just glad in America, though, we've matured out of that as the wealth has grown, the idolatry has clearly come down. Aren't you glad for that? All right, that was sarcasm. Yeah, so it is interesting. As the wealth of the nations flow, idolatry actually increases. And we just are more subtle as a educated society with our idolatry. We're just more subtle with it. Are we? You call the show's called American Idol. Like, what in the world? Like, we brag about it even. And so there is this idolizing of all kinds of aspects of life, and wealth seems to flow with it. And the more the wealth flows, the more individuals become self-confident that it is through our own effort or the things that we're worshiping that's generating this greater wealth. And this can happen from all spectrums within, say, American culture and other cultures around the world. And so when the last day comes, these individuals who've put a lot of trust in this wealth and the idolizing things that brought about this wealth, they're not going to celebrate this. The humility to say, let's go learn from the Lord. Instead, they will be abased. They will be stricken with terror. They will hide in the rocks and in the dust of the ground. And so it's a warning for these rebels in the last day. And that's why it says, for the Lord of hosts will have a day of reckoning against everyone who is proud and lofty, and against everyone who is lifted up, that he may be abased. And so this is the interesting message of Isaiah 2. Now, I love this. This is early on in Isaiah's ministry, his prophetic ministry. It's early on too, and he's going to find out as he gets more and more revelation that the city of Jerusalem is going to be destroyed, and the Babylonians are going to cart everything off. They're going to lose everything. There's going to be a tremendous sign of destruction and judgment, and that God will preserve a remnant. And out of that remnant, ultimately, these things that are predicted in Isaiah chapter 2 will one day come true, is that this remnant will be preserved, and one day God will bring about these things here. And so I do think that the modern Jewish state could be, at some point, the focal point of these things. Again, we've got to be careful about this. It could be 10,000 years from now, and Israel could come and go 3 times between now and then. Same with America, for that matter. We just don't know. But it does seem that at least the 1900 years of absence of a Jewish state, of it emerging in this area, eventually taking the city of Jerusalem, and having the city of Jerusalem under its authority and rule, I think is at least intriguing, and should at least cause us to ask the question, is this Jewish nation that is now established in the Holy Land a precursor to these ultimate events? And the streaming of the nations to the house of the Lord, which currently isn't there, right? So I think it's at least intriguing as to whether this generation of Jewish settlers in the Jewish land, in the Holy Land, the state there, that those individuals, as they return from the 4 corners of the earth, as is described, by the way, in Isaiah, one day bringing them from the 4 corners of the earth, saw it not in Micah as well, that maybe this nation that is formed there may have something to do with these predictions in the future. And if it does, then there's a possibility that maybe not in our lifetimes, but maybe in our kids' lifetimes or grandkids' lifetimes or things like that, they may see some of these events unfold in real time. Yeah. But we don't know. And it could be 1,000 years from now, so we have to be cautious with this. I think it was Spurgeon who said, I live every day for just this day and for that day. 2 days. He says, I live every day for 2 days. The day in front of me and that day when all things will be recompensed. All things will be judged and evaluated. So he said, I live for those 2 days. I think that's good advice. Live for just today and for that day. And so don't obsess over this too much, but I do think as believers and just as observers from history, we hear these predictions in Isaiah chapter 2. These are strong predictions. And we see Israel return after 1,900 years absence. I think we could say, wow. And remember that Israel was absent from the Holy Land for 70 years. When they come back, reestablish, and eventually rebuild and all those kinds of things, we get the first advent, the first coming of Christ. Then, 70 AD, temples destroyed, cities destroyed, dispersion throughout the world. And now, 1,900 years gone, they're called back from the 4 corners of the world, back to Jerusalem. Could that be a precursor to the second advent? It just seems like that fits with the way God has done things. And given my obsession with typological preterist historical premillennialism, this fits the pattern. I'm looking for patterns. God tends to do things a certain way. He has a habit of doing things a certain way. He likes patterns. He likes allusions to things. He's the ultimate foreshadower of things. And I think Israel returning from Babylonian captivity and eventually the advent of Messiah is a foreshadowing of the way God does things. So Israel returning to the Holy Land could be the next wave of fulfillment of things to come. Yes?
Chapter 5, I wanted to find out
Oh, 1948 years.
148 years is when Abraham was born, and that's when Israel became a nation.
1948 on the Julian calendar. Yeah, some of those patterns. Yeah, I'm intrigued by a lot of those kinds of patterns. I'm intrigued also by the fact that the entire world has yet again focused its entire attention on this little strip of land. Doesn't that seem strange? Like it's smaller than Rhode Island, I think, in terms of land mass, right? Nobody's talking about Rhode Island. You know what I mean? Like, no one's brought up Rhode Island. No one's thinking about Rhode Island. No one's obsessed over Rhode Island. I mean, it's a fine state. I think started by Baptists, by the way. Rhode Island is the only state in the country founded by Baptists, started by Baptists. But it has the first Baptist church in America is in Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island. But no one's thinking about Rhode Island. There's just not. And unless you're born there, or unless you're from there. But the whole world's talking about Israel. The whole world. About this little strip of land. I find that intriguing. You're from Rhode Island?
I grew up there.
Did you really? In Providence? Yeah, I've been there a few times. Yeah, I love that area. Heading from there up toward Boston, that is beautiful. Fall colors right in there. Oh man, you grew up in a really pretty place for fall colors. Here in Texas, it goes from green and then the leaves just fall off. Like, oh, we give up. And up there, the leaves actually go, no, we're going to work for our living. And they change in these really pretty colors. In Texas, they're just like, nah, I'm not working that hard. We're done. Yeah, so you've lost the fall colors by being here. But yeah, so there's no problem with Rhode Island, but it just seems like that's actually probably land-wise might be a little bigger than Israel. And the whole world knows about Jerusalem and Gaza and the conflict and, all of that. Like, why? Why is the whole world so upset about this one little strip of land that's smaller than Rhode Island? And to me, it feels like, these kinds of prophecies are coming full circle. So, yeah. All right. Well, let's pray together. God, thank you for your word, for this hopeful promise of the coming day of the Lord, where all the nations will stream to the mountain of the Lord to be taught by you. Thank you for also the warning passage that's here, Lord, that in humility may we live before you, not by the works of our own hands, but, Lord, by your creative power are we here. Not by the works of our own hands have we been made wealthy or wise or good or any of those things, but only by your grace have we been provided anything. But you have, O Lord, by making Jesus poor on our behalf, we have become rich in him. And so with that hope, may we live today with the focus on that day, the day when we will be with you forever and ever, where all the nations will celebrate our great God and King. Amen. All right, you guys have a great day.